Hi everyone, welcome to day 22, the second day of the transform phase. Today I want to talk about a topic that's not always easily defined, but I'm going to try my best to do so. So we're going to be talking about spirituality. So what is spirituality? Basically, spirituality has a very loosey-goosey definition because it really depends on what spirituality means to you. But oftentimes, spirituality is connected with this idea of finding the meaning of life. It can also represent some kind of connectedness to the natural world, either the physical or the visible, and the metaphysical, which is the non-visible. It usually comes from within us, so it's a representation of our soul or our spirit. It's very open-ended. It can include different elements of an organized religion, personal religious beliefs, personal spiritual practices, connectedness to nature, a quest for truth and meaning, and experiences with sound, light, or color. So that's a very vague definition, and as I said, it's very different for every individual. But it's also important to realize that spirituality or spiritual health is a primary food. So it's something that feeds us and nourishes us at a deeper level and at a different level than secondary food does. Okay, so let's take a minute to talk about the difference between spirituality and religion, because I think this is very important. From my personal experience, I used to think that spirituality and religion were the same thing. So because I wasn't very religious, I automatically assumed I wasn't very spiritual. And now I'm still not super religious, although I do have a particular religion that I identify with, but I'm a lot more spiritual. So you can be spiritual without being religious, and you can be religious without being spiritual, and you can be spiritual and religious. So there can be a difference between the two, but they can also be separated. So spirituality typically involves some kind of internal process of seeking your own personal truth and identity. It's a process of deriving meaning, purpose, and direction for your life. It involves some kind of openness to exploring an intangible relationship with some higher power. It also involves this idea of connecting with yourself and with others. And it's a belief in your own experience. Religion, on the other hand, is a concern with what exists beyond the visible world, which is a similarity in spirituality. It involves the existence of a creator, which can be a single being, a group of beings, or a spiritual entity. It's typically a fundamental set of beliefs and practices agreed upon by religious believers. So it can be organized or it can be individual for a particular person. It usually involves rituals and prayer. It involves a greater connectedness with a higher power. And one thing that sets it apart from spirituality is that it's a belief in someone else's experience. So one thing I want to point out is that there are some things on each of these lists that can go in the other list. So it really depends on what your definition of spirituality and your definition of religion is. There may be some overlap between the two, but there also might be areas that are completely different. So I think one of the biggest differences between spirituality and religion is not in terms of what the actual practices are and what the actual set of beliefs are, but that spirituality is belief in your own experience, and religion is more about believing in someone else's experience. So here are some of the different elements of a spiritual practice. This is just a list that by no means includes everything, because a spiritual practice is very individualized and really depends on what your belief in spirituality is. But it can include meditation, chanting, breathing exercises, ceremonies or rituals that may involve sound, light, color, things like that. It can include daily interactions with other people, view of yourself, some kind of process of contemplation or reflection, different movements and postures. It can involve energy balancing. So, Feng Shui, by definition, is a spiritual practice because it's all about establishing a flow of energy within your room and your home. It can include studying spiritual teachings. It can include different kinds of affirmations, positive ones, and prayer. So, how can we develop a spiritual practice that is individual and makes sense for us? I think the first thing to do is to somehow establish awareness and to be present and live in the now. So this might just require, and maybe it's just as simple as closing your eyes for 5 minutes a day and just listening to the world around you, or tuning into what you're feeling, if you have any tension somewhere in your body, or if your body is sending you any kind of physical signals like pain or tingling or anything like that, just to tune into what's happening right now. You can also reflect on different questions or what's happening, or you can actually use this reflection type of exercise to establish awareness. So you can do that by journaling or through meditation. I think another big part of developing a spiritual practice is this idea of curiosity. So it's exploring and doing new things. It's stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's experiencing this element of openness and expansiveness and doing things that you've never done before, learning new things, having an open mind. A spiritual practice can include spending time alone, but it can also include some kind of connection with another person or another group of people. Spending time in nature is a good way to develop a spiritual practice, and one that I do in my own spiritual practice. It can include daily rituals. These rituals typically provide some kind of emotional, physical, or mental benefit, but they can represent anything on this list or the list that we showed previously, or anything that's not on those lists that you want to include. It can be anything that you think provides you with emotional, physical, or mental benefit. And then movement is a really great thing to incorporate into a spiritual practice because it increases connection with and awareness of your body. So things like dance, yoga, martial arts, a fitness routine, or just doing different individual postures can help you to incorporate movement and to increase that connection with your body. All right, so your homework. First of all, I want you to take a look at your current level of spirituality. After listening to what I'm talking about and identifying different elements of what spirituality is and different elements of a spiritual practice, I want you to take a look at your current spiritual practice or your current definition of spirituality. Then I want you to start to develop, or if you already have some kind of spiritual practice, to expand upon that. And you can do this by just doing one new thing that you would consider spiritual. I'd also like you guys to start to contemplate these questions and write responses in your journal, or you don't have to write them. You can just close your eyes and think about what your answers or your responses might be. Keep in mind that there is no correct answer. There's just your answer. So the first question is, what is your life purpose? And you may not get to the bottom of it for a long time after much contemplation. So start to contemplate what the response is, and then come back tomorrow and the next day and the next day and just continue to think about what your life purpose is. And another one is, what are the most important parts of your life for you? So this might be something that really comes natural and you know the answer right away, but it might be something that really requires a little bit of thought for. What is your understanding of a higher power? Again, this might be something that you know exactly what the answer is, but it might be something that you really just have to take a look at, and what maybe separate your religious beliefs from your personal beliefs, or separate organized religion from your personal religion. So it just takes a little bit of reflection and contemplation to answer that one. And then I'd like you to really think about how you would define spirituality and religion, and what the difference between the two is. So I gave you some ideas of some differences between the two, but you might, define spirituality and religion completely different than I did. And then I'd really like you to think about when you have felt most at peace and what makes you feel the most joyous. And ultimately, the idea is, once you've nailed those things down, is to do those things more so that you bring in more peace and more joy into your life. So that's all for day 2 of the transform phase. Good luck developing your spiritual practice. If you'd like to share some of the things that you currently do with us on our discussion board to give us some idea of what your definition of spirituality is, please feel free. That's completely optional. I know that spirituality is very individualized, and some people just aren't ready to start talking about it, which is completely fine. You really don't have to, but it's something that we'd love to hear. So, all right, that's it. Thank you.